Hi, I'm Tom Ballantyne, author of O'Reilly, here with Detective Mike Zullo, the lead investigator with the Cold Case Posse under Sheriff Joe Arapaio, Sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona, the largest, population-wise, the largest county in the state of Arizona. And as we all know, Sheriff Joe is the most celebrated and highly recognized sheriff in all of America. And as we also know, he is conducting, under Mike's leadership, an investigation, an historic investigation of the President of the United States, but not so much the President, frankly, as the documents that have been provided to prove, if you will, his eligibility. So I'm grateful that Mike has consented to this interview, and consider Mike a friend and quite frankly, a hero, because of his willingness to do what, and Sheriff Joe's willingness as well, to do what apparently no one else in this country is willing to do, and that's to simply confront the evidence. So Mike, I appreciate your being here. I understand you're not getting a lot of sleep these days. Is that accurate?
I haven't gotten a lot of sleep in the last 8 months.
8 months, so that's how long basically you've been on this investigation.
Yes.
And Mike, you've had other professional experience in your life, but you've been in law enforcement for the past 13 years, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And you served as a detective and as a police officer in New Jersey prior to moving to Arizona.
Correct.
And what's your experience here in Arizona in terms of police work, if you will, or detective work?
The only experience I have here in Arizona is with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Formulated with the Cold Case Posse there.
That's been for the past 7 years,
yeah,
is that
about
correct?
7 years, I think.
Okay. I'd like to actually just ask a few questions about our elected officials here in the state of Arizona, both state and national officials, and ask what inquiries they may have made of you and of your investigation in order for them to be apprised of the status of the investigation and of the facts that you've uncovered. I'd like to start with our Republican, and quite frankly, every official I'll name here is a Republican, interestingly. But our Republican Governor, Jan Brewer, I don't know how far Jan's office is from here, but it's within a couple of miles, I suspect. I also suspect she has a telephone, but maybe not. The budget's rather tight these days. But in any case, has Governor Brewer made any personal inquiries of you or of the sheriff regarding the investigation?
Not to my knowledge. I know I haven't received any, and if the sheriff did, I'm sure he would tell me.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. So here we have a Republican governor who has not made any inquiries whatsoever into the investigation that's taking place a stone's throw, if you will, from her office right here in Maricopa County. Not a word that you've heard. Well, let's go down the list. How about the State Attorney General, also Republican again, Tom Horn? Has Tom made any inquiries?
No, sir.
Interesting. Now, Tom's role as Attorney General, I'm sure most people know this, but he's the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state. Is that correct?
Yes, he is.
Interesting. So no inquiries. We are all aware, of course, of Secretary of State Ken Bennett, whose primary responsibility, or at least one of his primary responsibilities as Secretary of State, is to ensure the accuracy, if you will, of the ballot and the eligibility, if you will, of the candidates whose names are on the ballot. Has Secretary Bennett made any inquiries of your office, Mike?
No, we made inquiries of Secretary Bennett, but he's made no inquiries.
So you reached out to him?
Yes.
And you did, in fact, have some interview or face-to-face discussion with him?
I had 2 meetings with him.
2 meetings, and that was sometime within the last 30 days, or
yes,
approximately. What can you tell us essentially what transpired in that meeting, and what was his reaction to the facts, if you will, that you revealed to him?
This meeting took place about 2 weeks prior to us, I believe, going to the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
We were discussing the dilemma he found himself in regarding keeping Barack Obama's name possibly off the ballot.
At the insistence of some of us within his constituency here in the state of Arizona, right?
Correct. And had about a 45-minute meeting with him. During the meeting, he advised me that he had not seen our March 1st press conference. had not watched any of the videos that we produced and really didn't have a working knowledge of what we were working on.
Amazing. So he's the Secretary of State charged with the responsibility of essentially maintaining the sanctity of the ballot, and he had not even watched the press conference or seen any of the evidence that was presented therein.
That's right. I actually had to start from point A and try to bring them up to speed in 20 minutes, something that would take hours to do.
Amazing, frankly. I won't spend a lot of time on these other names, Mike, but let's just go down the list. House Speaker, again, Republican, Andy Tobin. Any inquiry? How about Senate President Steve Pierce?
No.
Okay, again, a Republican. We have basically a so-called veto-proof Republican. Mike's not a political guy. I am, frankly, so I'm the guy asking the questions, but we have a veto-proof, if you will, Republican majority in this legislature, and they act like they have no interest whatsoever in your investigation.
That's what it appears.
From their obvious absence. Okay, let's now jump to the federal level or the national level. Senator John McCain lives when he's here, I suppose, which may not be often, but lives here in Maricopa County. I assume that John Kyle does. Both U.S. senators with, in John McCain's case, 30 years of experience. Not sure about Kyle, but he's been there for a while. Neither of them have made any inquiries of your office.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Amazing. John McCain, of course, famously stated about a week, 2 weeks ago, during the time I believe that you were in Hawaii, that Barack Obama's name would be on the ballot. And a day or two later, Ken Bennett, somewhat gleefully perhaps, accepted on face value the statement from Onaka that the document or the information on the document was the same as what was in the file. Speaking of the White House .gov document and their vault copy. And apparently McCain had put the word out that his name would be on the ballot, and Secretary Bennett apparently agreed. Bottom line is that with all of these candidates, including, have not mentioned congressional Congressman Jeff Flake, who's now running for the U.S. Senate for John Kyle's seat. Also, those opposing him, Will Cardin, another Republican. By the way, Clara Van Steenwyk, who is a Tea Party candidate, a Republican, but a Tea Party candidate, has openly called for an investigation of the president and is in full support, I'll let you know, Mike, of your investigation. He's the only one, and then there's a fellow named Brian Hackbarth, also a former mayor here in Arizona, is also, in fact, stated on the record, because I asked him, that he would, in fact, favor an investigation. Again, that's not your purpose. You're here to do your own investigation from a law enforcement perspective. Finally, we have congressional candidates Matt Salmon and Will Cardin, again, both Arizona Republicans, who are vying for Jeff Flake's soon-to-be vacated congressional seat. Neither of them will, because I've interviewed them, they've stated on camera that they will not pursue an investigation. So, and none of these candidates have actually made inquiries of your office.
No.
Well, it looks like we've pretty much covered that. Bottom line is that the Republicans in both the state and federal government representing Arizona citizens have no interest in your investigation. Hi, I'm Tom Ballantyne again here with Mike Zullo and my cameraman and co-producer Gabe Zolna in Sheriff Arapaio's downtown Phoenix office, Sheriff Joe being the celebrated Sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona. And we're continuing our interview of Mike with regard, Mike is the lead investigator of the Cold Case Posse, investigating in an historic investigation a sitting President of the United States, or at least the documents that would prove both his identity and his eligibility. And we've covered the fact that not a single Republican official that we're aware of in this state has supported or even inquired of Mike regarding his now 8-month investigation. But I'd like to turn our attention briefly to the local news media. Mike, during the the March 1st press conference, and shortly thereafter, Channel 5, and by the way, pretty much the national media and all of the state media were invited, is that correct?
Correct.
A number of them did show up, as it turns out.
The local media.
The local media, pretty much, so the national media
Did not.
somewhat missing in action again, or AWOL more accurately. But Channel 5, the local CBS affiliate, actually, to my amazement, frankly, seemed to cover it with some degree of balance. Do you recall seeing their coverage?
I was participating in their coverage.
Yes, well, there you were. You saw it from the inside, frankly.
I saw it from the other side.
Well, many of us were surprised at the fact that, A, they would actually cover it, and B, that they were not lashing out, at least the coverage I saw, against you and the sheriff. You were, of course, asked about who you voted for and what your political leanings were. Not a question that I remember by the media at large regarding the evidence that you had very carefully articulated. But let's talk about the other NBC local affiliate. Have they covered this at all to your knowledge? Or have they made any inquiries of you?
I believe after the press conference I had inquiries made from a number of these agencies.
Okay.
I did appear on a couple of them.
Okay.
I don't remember which ones they were.
All right. So NBC, CBS, Fox News, do you remember if they covered it or not?
I don't recall.
Okay. Nationally?
Nationally, I can tell you they didn't.
Yes, nationally it's been a complete stonewalling, if you will. Let's talk about the radio, and again, this is just to determine, if you will, whether these people have actually made inquiries of you personally or of the sheriff, and it would probably have come through you. Barry Young and Michelle Larson?
No.
Okay. How about Terry Gilbert?
No.
How about Mack and Gatos?
No.
Mack and Gatos, by the way, had Secretary Bennett on right after he made his announcement that he was accepting the word of Alvin Onaka that the document was legit in spite of all of the evidence that you produced. And Mack and Gatos, so-called conservatives, completely mocked the whole investigation, mocked the very notion of even worrying about whether the commander-in-chief was a legal citizen. But and Secretary of State Bennett famously apologized for having, if he had in any way embarrassed the state of Arizona by asking the state of Hawaii to verify his credentials. I was stunned by that. So none of these people, the local people, have made inquiries after that initial press conference. Okay. That probably is all we need to do on that. But let me just ask you one other series of questions, if I can, Mike, regarding the inter-jurisdictional cooperation among the law enforcement and other government agencies. In your 13 years in law enforcement, has it generally been the case that one police department or one legal entity or agency will cooperate with another in this type of, not this type because it's unprecedented, but in a typical criminal investigation?
Generally, if it's an investigation that would have multiple jurisdictions, there would be cooperation between the officers on the ground and those in command.
Okay. In the case of our current investigation, what has been your experience thus far?
Nobody's going to cooperate with us. Nobody wants to talk to us. Nobody on the federal level is going to talk to us. We made inquiries from certain government officials and basically have been told, if you have a problem, go to the FBI. Okay.
So, and the FBI, I suspect, falls somewhere under the jurisdiction of Eric Holder. I'm not entirely certain, but okay. So basically, in this case, not only have they not cooperated, would it be typical in a normal investigation for these agencies, if they had information, to voluntarily contact you? Does that happen?
If they have information to voluntarily contact us, that could happen. But basically what we would do in something like this is a state and a county investigation in one sense.
Right.
That really should be turned over to the federal authorities, except there's no place to turn it over.
Do you mean you mean that the Department of Justice would not want to handle this for you?
I think he's got enough problems on his own.
I'm sure that's true. Fast and Furious, etc. Okay, but so bottom line is that not only they have not, offered any help or cooperation, have they resisted your efforts?
When we made, I think we made public, Sheriff Arapaio put some requests in writing to folks at Selective Service and whatnot. And the way that the information comes back is basically one line, one paragraph, and if you have any problems, you can take it up with the FBI.
Interesting. So very little cooperation.
There's no cooperation.
No cooperation, okay. Well, I think we were somewhat aware of that. I'm not sure that there's a whole lot more to ask, Mike, other than I did actually uncover, in fact, Nellie Ristbat of Butter Dezillion's blog, excellent blog, who has been on this issue for a long time, provided me, and I believe you as well, with a report from the Inspector General in the year 2000, which was entirely focused on the huge national problem with fraudulent birth certificates. And the Inspector General herself, who is works under the direction of the Secretary of Health in the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, or HHS actually at this point, did this report, and it's a very extensive, in-depth report documenting the problem of fraudulent birth documents, birth certificates, nationwide, and encouraging all agencies at all levels to do their best to uncover this sort of fraud. But would you say that in the case of the state of Hawaii, you were there 2 weeks ago, that you got cooperation from them in trying to determine whether this birth certificate was in fact a legal document or as opposed to a fraudulent one?
I can't discuss a lot of what happened over there in Hawaii,
okay.
But I can tell you that we didn't receive cooperation.
Very good. When you showed up at the Department of Health, you were actually greeted, if you will, or received by someone from the Attorney General's office as opposed to the Department of Health. Is that correct? Did that sort of raise a red flag for you?
Usually if somebody sends in their attorney, it raises a red flag.
I got it. Well, Mike, I want to tell you that I, as a private citizen, am extremely grateful for all that you have done. I consider you a modern-day Wyatt Earp, if you will. You look a little bit like him. And, of course, Sheriff Joe as well. And we are truly grateful for your willingness to take this on when no one else in the country is willing to do so. The Congress, the House, the Senate, of course we don't expect the Senate to do it, but the Republican Congress, at our state level, no one is willing to even pass an eligibility bill, or even in our state to discuss it, and yet you and the sheriff and the other members of the posse have basically risked your life and your reputations, if you will, to pursue this. And I can just tell you for a vast number of American citizens that we are truly grateful.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And we pray for you. And Ronald Reagan, we were at his memorial over in Simi Valley 2 weeks ago, Lord Monckton and I, and basically there's an inscription there which reads something to the effect that he believes that all men are good and that in the end truth will prevail if we stand for truth. And I believe, Mike, that's what you're doing, and I think you have the thanks of both man and heaven for your efforts.
Well, I hope so, and the truth needs no polishing.